Hello everyone, welcome to English for Oil and Gas. Today's topic is oil basics and crude oil. Before talking about crude oil and discussing this issue, we'll just take some topical vocabulary. Let's see and study the new words and expressions. Crude oil is translated like сырая нефть. Non-renewable energy – невозобновляемые источники энергии. Drilling and pumping – бурение и закачка. The Paleozoic era – палеозойская эра. A trap – ловушка. Also, we can use the verb we have in the English language, like to trap. Oil accumulations. Скопление залежей нефти. You can translate. Permeability. Проницаемость. Density. Плотность. A cap rock. Покрывающая порода, либо называем мы a cap rock как покрышка. Bitumen. Bitumen. API gravity. It is named after the American Petroleum Institute. Градус Ани, or градус API, we just say, единица измерения плотности нефти, разработанная Американским институтом нефти. Sulfur, сера. Nitrogen, азот. Fractions, фракция. Sweet oil, низкосернистая нефть. Sour oil, высокосернистая нефть. Benchmark crude, or we can call it just benchmark or marker crude, or just marker, which is translated like эталонная нефть, базисный сорт нефти для определения цен. So, you know today's topical vocabulary, and all these phrases and new words will be used in the texts and in the assignments. So let's see what crude oil is. So, what is crude oil? Crude oil is an organic liquid substance often found below the Earth's surface. It is made up of thousands of molecules composed of different hydrogen and carbon atoms. Such compounds are called hydrocarbons. These hydrocarbons also contain different proportions of impurities like oxygen, sulfur, nitrogen, and heavy metal atoms. Crude oil is highly flammable and is an excellent source of energy. Its sister hydrocarbon, natural gas, is another source of energy. Oil is called a non-renewable energy source because it cannot be replenished. What is petroleum? The word petroleum is derived from the Latin petra, which means rock, and oleum, which means oil. It's commonly used to refer to crude oil, but it may also refer to other related hydrocarbons. Some hydrocarbons are gaseous rather than liquid. Methane is the most common example of these hydrocarbon gases. This is the kind of natural gas that we most often use in our kitchens at home. Petroleum deposits are often found in natural underground reservoirs called oil fields. The oil in these fields can then be extracted by drilling and pumping. So, how is oil formed? Let's see oil formation and get some new information. Oil is formed from the accumulation of hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons accumulate naturally, thousands of feet below the surface of the earth, from the decomposition of organic materials like plants and marine animals, which died during the Paleozoic era between 245 and 544 million years ago. Trapped beneath the ground under enormous pressure and high temperatures, these hydrocarbons were compressed and eventually transformed into crude oil after millions of years. Underground oil accumulations are formed when three conditions are met. First, there must be a source, rock, rich in hydrocarbons, and buried deep enough so that the heat from the Earth's core can cook them into oil. Second, there should be a porous rock nearby in which oil can accumulate. It is often sandstone. If the holes in the rock are interconnected, then oil can flow easily out of the rock. This condition is called permeability. The porous rock must have good permeability, which is why studying the structure of rocks is an important step to finding oil. Third, there is usually a cap rock or seal to trap the oil in the underground reservoirs and prevent it from seeping to the surface. Within these reservoirs, hydrocarbons are typically organized like a three-layer cake, with a layer of water below the oil and a layer of gas above it. Much of the oil that escapes to the surface often evaporates into the air, but it can leave behind deposits of residual hydrocarbons called bitumen. So, in the given picture, you can see oil formation process. So in this one, you can see the Paleozoic era. It is between 245 to 545 million years ago. So you can see here dead organisms that were trapped underground, and under the influence of high temperature and pressure, so they are transformed into oil. Let's see the oil properties. So, talking about crude oil, just talking about its properties, you can just say that oil is found and under what conditions it was formed. So crude oil properties can vary widely depending on these factors. It is different physical properties are used to design the right kind of refineries, classify the oil, for example, West Texas Intermediate or Oman, and determine an appropriate price for it. The properties of oil include its density, called the API gravity. You know that it is named after the American Petroleum Institute. Sulfur content, nitrogen content, carbon residue, and distillation range. Each of these properties is important for different reasons. For example, the sulfur content of crude oil is important because it determines the kind of treatment that it will require at a refinery. The higher the sulfur level, the bigger the effect it will have on the environment, and the more corrosive effect it will have on equipment. API gravity is also important. It is essentially a measure of density. It determines whether a specific type of crude oil has a higher or lower boiling range or distillate yields, which is important for separating and extracting different parts or fractions. Different oil-producing areas produce different kinds of crude oil, and depending on its mixture of hydrocarbons, crude oil can vary in color, composition, and consistency. Oil is classified into different types grades. The following classifications are most common. So, oil can be classified as either light or heavy, depending on its API gravity or just density. Generally, the higher its API gravity, the lower its density. Oil that is lighter in color has a thin consistency and flows easily, usually contains less metals and sulfur compounds. It's known as light oil. Oil that is high in metal and sulfur content is considered low-grade oil. It generally has too much carbon, not enough hydrogen, and is more time-consuming to produce and hard to refine. It's known as heavy oil. Sour or sweet crude oil. So oil, as you see, can also be classified as either sour or sweet, depending on the amount of sulfur it contains. Oil with a high sulfur content, 0.5% and above, by weight, is considered sour. Sweet crude oil, on the other hand, has low amounts of these sulfur compounds. So, a reference crude oil or benchmark oil. So, some common crude oil types are used as a reference or benchmark to determine the value of other crude oils. Some of these reference crude oils are Brent Blend, Dubai Oman, Tapis, or West Texas Intermediate. A blend of as for Brent Blend, so it is a blend of several crude oils from fields in the North Sea region, located above Germany and the United Kingdom. The price of oil produced in Africa, Europe, and the Middle East tends to be based on this oil. Dubai Oman, used as a benchmark for Middle East sour crude oil flowing to the Asia-Pacific region. Tapis crude oil is oil produced in Malaysia that is used as a reference for light oil from East Asia. And last, West Texas Intermediate, WTD, WTI, a very highly quality sweet light oil produced in North America. So, let's answer and discuss the following. What is crude oil? What is petroleum? How is oil formed? What are the main oil properties? What are the main oil classifications? If you have answered all these questions correctly, you have understood this topic. And finally, the last assignment for you is just to write a short report on the following. Please write on the topic the basic composition of crude oil. For example, you are given an example writing. Crude oil is a mixture of comparatively volatile liquid hydrocarbons, compounds composed mainly of hydrogen and carbon, though it also contains some nitrogen, sulfur, and oxygen. Those elements from a large variety of complex molecular structures, some of which cannot be readily identified. Regardless of variations, however, almost all crude oil ranges from 82 to 87% carbon by weight and 12 to 15% hydrogen by weight. Crude oils are customarily characterized by the type of hydrocarbon compound that is most prevalent in them: paraffins, naphthens, and aromatics. Paraffins are the most common hydrocarbons in crude oil. Certain liquid paraffins are the major constituents of gasoline, petrol, and are therefore highly valued. Naphthens are an important part of all liquid refinery products, but they also form some of the heavy asphalt-like residues of refinery processes. Aromatics generally constitute only a small percentage of most crudes. The most common aromatic in crude oil is benzene, a popular building block in the petrochemical industry.